In today's world, being constantly available has been mistaken for being kind, supportive, or reliable. But there is a cost, a silent cost, that most people do not talk about. Every time you respond to a message the second it arrives, every time you answer a call, even though you are mentally exhausted, and every time you drop your priorities to take on someone else's, you are sending a message. And that message is this: my time is not sacred. What most people do not realize is that accessibility is not just about time. It is about energy. It is about attention. Every interaction you have, no matter how small, pulls from your mental and emotional reserves. And when those reserves are constantly drained, you are left scattered, unfocused, and more reactive than intentional. Look around at the people who are moving fast, building, leveling up in silence. They are not the ones checking their phones every 5 minutes. They are not the ones caught in every group chat, every invitation, every last-minute favor. They are selective, not because they are rude, but because they understand the value of their focus. Focus is a luxury in a world addicted to distraction. And the more available you are to others, the less available you are to yourself. Think about how many times you have delayed working on something important just because someone needed a quick favor. Think about how often your mind has been occupied with someone else's problem when you were supposed to be investing that energy into your own growth. That is the trap. People will always have needs, crises, and demands. And if you do not set boundaries, you will always be reacting to someone else's life, instead of building your own. There is also a psychological side to this. When you make yourself too available, you are subconsciously seeking validation through usefulness. You say yes, not because you always want to, but because it feels good to be needed. But that kind of validation is short-term. It keeps you stuck in a role where your value depends on what you can do for others, not who you are becoming. True growth demands that you protect your space. You cannot evolve while being constantly interrupted. You cannot create something meaningful while being emotionally entangled in other people's issues. You need mental clarity. You need uninterrupted blocks of time to think, reflect, and act from a place of vision, not from guilt or obligation. Being less available does not make you selfish. It makes you self-aware. It means you are beginning to understand that not everyone deserves access to you. It means you are no longer willing to sacrifice your future to manage someone else's present. And most importantly, it means you are ready to level up in a real way, without apology, without over-explaining, and without dragging your past attachments with you. Because here is the truth. Your energy is a limited resource, and every yes you give without thinking is a no to something that could have changed your life. There is a reason why the most powerful people in any space are often the least accessible. Distance creates value. It creates mystery. It creates control. The more available you are, the more familiar you become, and familiarity over time leads to a loss of perceived value. That is not just a theory. It is a psychological reality. People respect what they do not have constant access to. They pay more attention to what feels rare. When you start to create distance, something interesting happens. You begin to see who really respects your boundaries, who only benefited from your lack of them. People who are used to having constant access to you will often interpret your silence as a problem. But that is because they were never engaging with your presence. They were dependent on your availability. That is a hard truth to swallow. But it is necessary. Taking a step back is not about cutting people off. It is about cutting off the energy leaks. You start to notice who drains you, who distracts you, and who only calls when they need something. And once you recognize those patterns, you can redirect your time to what actually builds your life. Distance also gives you the space to become. When you are always surrounded by people, constantly communicating, constantly reacting, you do not get the silence needed to evolve. Growth is not loud. It is quiet. It happens in the spaces where no one is watching. It happens in your routines, your habits, your thoughts. When you distance yourself, you give those parts of your life room to expand. And here is something most people do not understand. Being less available forces others to rise. When you stop showing up for everyone's crisis, you give them a chance to grow through it themselves. When you stop fixing everything, people have to learn how to stand on their own. Your constant availability may be comfortable for others, but it might also be stunting their growth. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is step back and let them figure it out. At the same time, distance recenters your identity. When you are always responding to others, you start to lose track of what you actually think, feel, and want. You become a mirror for everyone else's emotions and needs. But when you take that step back, when you become more intentional about who gets access to you, you start to hear your own voice again. You remember who you were before you got caught up in being everything for everyone. Power is not found in overexertion. It is found in clarity, in presence, in restraint. When you stop scattering your energy in 100 directions, you gain the power to channel it into one focused movement. And that is when everything changes. Your work deepens. Your decisions sharpen. Your relationships get healthier. Because you are finally operating from intention, not obligation. And maybe most importantly, distance builds self-respect. When you stop making yourself overly available, you are telling yourself, I matter. My time matters. My goals matter. And that shift, when internalized, creates a new baseline. You stop settling. You stop chasing. You stop explaining your worth. Because you finally realize you do not need to prove it. That is how you begin to level up, by pulling back from everything that was keeping you at the same level. And sometimes the only way to rise is to become less reachable. Leveling up is not just about big moves or sudden breakthroughs. It is about the daily discipline of protecting your energy. Saying no, setting boundaries, and limiting your availability require consistency and courage. It is easy to feel guilty at first. You might worry about disappointing people or missing out on opportunities. But this discipline is necessary. It is the foundation for real growth. Think about your energy as a bank account. Every yes is a withdrawal. Every no is a deposit. If you keep withdrawing without deposits, you will go bankrupt emotionally and mentally. The people who level up fastest are those who understand this balance. They know how to say no to distractions, so they can say yes to what truly matters. This discipline also means being selective with your time and who you spend it with. Not every person deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your attention. You must become vigilant about what you allow into your life. Because every interaction either fuels you or drains you. There is no neutral energy. It might feel uncomfortable at first, like you are missing out or being selfish. But in reality, you are becoming the guardian of your future self. The person you will become depends on what you protect today. When you choose your availability intentionally, you give yourself the chance to evolve without interruption. You will notice that as you set these boundaries, your relationships begin to shift. Some will grow deeper, founded on respect and mutual understanding. Others will fade away because they were based on convenience, not genuine connection. That is natural. Growth always requires some loss. Protecting your energy is not about isolation. It is about creating space for what matters. It is about investing in yourself so you can show up stronger, clearer, and more focused. When you become less available to distractions, you become more available to your purpose. And here is the paradox. The less you are available to everyone, the more people will seek your presence. Because when you protect your energy, you increase your value, not just to others, but to yourself. You become someone who commands respect, someone who inspires, someone who leads. So start today. Stop saying yes out of guilt. Stop feeling responsible for everyone's problems. Stop making yourself so accessible that you lose yourself. Instead, say no to what does not serve your growth. Say yes to your goals, your vision, and your peace. Leveling up fast is not about doing more. It is about doing less, but doing it with purpose. Protect your energy, protect your time, and watch how your life transforms.